Hello, everybody. Divine rise, grand rise, gracious rising. Blessed be to your day. Good morning. Because some of y'all need to kill off a little bit of yourselves, stepping into that dark night of the shadow. But we're going to get into that a little bit later. But living modestly. Living modestly. What exactly is living in our modesty? I remember that definition of living modesty. I remember the first time I heard about modesty, it was on some external thing like dress modestly or you have to dress modestly or act in a modest behavior, in a modest aspect. And it was always based on like external aspects, like you had to dress a certain way and then you could be modest, or you had to talk a certain way. But the truth to it is, your modesty is based on the quality of your behavior in proper balance. Your modesty is based on the quality of your behavior in proper balance. Living in that rhythm. So if you're living in your rhythm, when we think about trauma, we think about the traumatic events, we think about dealing with our shadow work, doing our shadow work in this case, as your occult psychologist. We think about living in a certain rhythm, and now that you're coming into that new space for yourself, the first thing that we do based on the trauma is we act out accordingly in correspondence to what we felt and went through the trauma. So for example, if somebody was sheltered and kept away from a lot of things, the first thing that they're going to want to experience in their life is the fun things in life that they miss based on whatever age that trauma happened. So I'll use for an example, when I was 8 years old, and my mother did what she did, took the money what she did, and then around when 12 came, and then I found out like how much the family secret that happened for me. From 12 years old on, I found myself wanting to live the other half of my life, longing for something that was missing that I had not yet defined. So I was stepping inside of this. We step inside of this space with ourselves of in between staying in what is piety. Bobby Hinn has always talked about the aspect of piety and then the aspect of the shameless. And then we use our definition of piety, the wallflower, staying content, staying in peace, staying in light. And then we go to the other side, we say going into the darkness and wilding out, and based on our level of hurt, that's how we're going to approach to that level. Both of these are deflection. Both of these become deflections. When we think about modesty, modesty is the middle point. Modesty is within the middle point. Modesty is being able to transmute from both points. I can learn from this and I can learn from this. I can take it as I need to build myself up, my quality, build my rhythm. Until we understand building our rhythm, until we understand that, our ego is always going to take the other half. I've talked about this before, talking about how the ego on either side of this polarity. So you want to be pious, now your ego is going to fill up everything fundamentally based on being pious. You never going to get me doing anything like that, stepping outside. Your ego is going to keep you in your comfort zone on this side. And to the motherfucker that wants to wild out, $40 for a gram and some crab legs, or you cash apping hoes for pictures in they inboxes. Now you on that side. You in your level of comfort. We got to remember, comfort is not. We got to get out of the side of the polarity of good and bad. It's based on what serves you and what doesn't serve you. Your comfortability is based on what serves you and what doesn't serve you, are the positive and negative. There's a lot of different things that I went through in my life that were in the negative sense, but it served a purpose for me based on learning. There was a lot of things that I learned within the pious aspects. My pops being a super Catholic, my mother's family, the upbringing, the initiation. There was a lot of things that I learned in that space that at a point in time, based on where I was at, it didn't serve a purpose at that one time, but I have to go back to understand how it serves a purpose now. My always wanted to be in this sense of self-defense. My sensitivity, our sensitivity is the influencer of self-defense. Your sensitivity is the influencer of your self-defense. So if you're still not dealt with your emotions, and when you're feeling sensitive, sensitivity has nothing to do with being the soft. Sensitivity has nothing to do with you being in a position and you're sitting there like, I'm sensitive. That means I'm soft, or it just simply means vulnerability. Your level of vulnerability. And we understand in order to heal, we got to become vulnerable. So we have to tap into understanding what sensitivity is. Our behavior reflects insensitivity based on the trauma, that event. Now you move in a sense to try not to be seen as our trauma. So now we'll act in a modest manner. We act in that modest manner, and then we find ourselves always having to double back. If you're noticing that you're acting in your realness, or you're stating your purpose, you're trying to state your purpose, you haven't addressed your level of sensitivity. I had to learn for myself. I did not address my level of sensitivity. That means I was always quick to react. My ego was always quick to come up and be like, hey, you know they doing that because of this, right? Or, hey, they doing that because of this, right? So then I came into that state of avoidance. So at some times in my life, I was sitting there in the stands. And other times in my life, I was out there on the field. The runner or the bystander. That's the two levels between how we go into this space. We have, for the example, use Kirk Franklin. That would be the example of piety, the piousness. So he stepped outside of when he stepped outside his ego, allow him to defend himself. What did you learn from that? That you don't have to, just because as long as you're maintaining a certain identity, you're only going to be seen a certain way. The conflict that's going to come up is something you're going to have to deal with. Going to the other end and all the countless things that Cardi B has done. And then constantly going back and apologizing for it. In the state of, I was being real. Based on that identity. You're only going to be as comfortable. You're only going to be as real as your level of comfort. You're only real to your level of comfort. That's like you sitting there and you go to your job, and then that's like sitting there going to your job and you complaining about the people at your job. But and then you feel like you voice your opinion out at your job in front of so you sitting there with your boss, and your boss is sitting there, because I've had this happen to me. Your boss is sitting there, standing there, and it's the kitchen's just full. Motherfucker standing there and you battling against your boss. Now you're in a state of emotion because you haven't learned your value. Of course you're going to spurt off based on that identity. Yeah, this is my value. I know my value. Without me, you couldn't do this, this, and this. Just like I hired you, just like you got trained, I can hire and train somebody else. The proper way to deal with your shit is on that internal narrative. I remember every time I'm watching people have arguments with the bosses, and then later on I was like, that's not how somebody that's in ownership of their self, accountable for themselves, is going to act. Because from every gangster movie I've ever seen, when the bosses go have a conversation, there's nobody around to interfere. There's nobody around to interfere. There's no one pulling strings. When it comes into you coming into this balance, allowing your aura to shine, you speaking with that confidence, there's no one around you to intervene because you've assessed and dealt with what's internal dealing inside of yourself. You've dealt with those internal narratives. You're not dependent upon other individuals, what they say and what they see and how they're going to react. You're not dependent upon others' perceptions of how you think, how you're moving. You're learning how to respond. Because the best thing that's going to happen is, what's the worst thing that can happen what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you sitting there at your job and you voice your opinion, you can get fired. You're going to get fired whether or not you go behind closed doors or not. But the best way to approach it is learning to respond. Your modesty and your behavior is based on how you respond. Your modesty and your humility and your growth is based on how you respond. If you find yourself always going back and forth, reacting the same exact ways you react to the same situations, and you're not realizing, you're not aware of yourself. If you're only able to communicate to a certain level, you need to check your self-awareness. If you're only able to, your behavior is always coming back to something, you always bring something up back from your past, that means there's something that you need to address. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're doing what they're programmed to do. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. What are you learning from it? They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. How are you using it? How are you transmuting that energy? How are you transmuting in that situation? They're only doing what the fuck the program's supposed to be done. You're only reacting based on something you haven't dealt with. You just start changing yourself. This is that ownership mentality we've been getting into. Really owning yourself first. You're an asset. All this information, I put up a video yesterday about maritime law and your body being a corporation, because your body is the corporation. Your body, you are the asset. You are the most valuable asset. Your automaton is your asset. When you change around being the liability, you stop being the liability based on reactions. You stop moving in you start moving in a more valued sense. The things you put out naturally return back to you. So what are you putting out? Is it of true value, or is it just of, I'm just expressing myself and being free? Because that's what you see every time. That's what you're seeing now. You got one dude, Matt, somebody, oh my God, he had to apologize to his son because I've never seen him like this. Or you got hurt. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. You get stuck in between that level of comfort. I wouldn't have apologized. You would have went back to that, because what memory did you go back to? That memory of when your mother didn't apologize to you? That's all you ever go back to. You always go back to a memory to connect it to yourself. That time your mom, the apology you still waiting on from your mother. The apology you still waiting on from your pops. The apology you still waiting on from your mother, your father, has now translated into the apology you still waiting on from your baby father, your man, your girl, your side chick, whatever the fuck you doing. You still moving it. You still looking for that same apology. That level of love that you didn't receive, you still looking for that same love in everything that you go into. You got to take that shit internal. You got to address the quality of your behavior. You got to really address the quality of your behaviors. What is your behavior based on? This is going deep into that permafrost with yourself. This is tapping into that permafrost. This is you stop going by that black ice. This is you acknowledging, are you tired of your own shit? Are you tired of your own shit yet? Are you tired of are you tired of realizing that every time you place judgment on something else outside of you, it's always coming from a feeling from inside of yourself based on avoidance? Are you ready to accept it yet? Are you ready to tap into the dark night of the shadow with yourself? Are you ready to ride? Are you ready to put that attack on Titan? Are you ready to deal with that giant, that shadow? The giant is the shadow. It's always going to be casted from your level of light. The giant is the shadow. It's always going to be casted from your level of light. So your shadow always going to look large based on how much light you put in, how much light you're dispersing. How are you dispersing your light into the space? And that's what we're getting into tomorrow night. Friday night lectures, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Friday night lectures. God, Alkhemist. My YouTube channel, we're getting into Rising Titan or Attack of the Titan. I don't know what title I want to use yet, but Attack of the Titan. Tonight, we're going to get deep into the aspects of getting, really becoming uncomfortable with the bullshit that you keep saying to yourself and stepping into that dark night of the shadow. Really addressing these underlying layers within yourself so you actually can start breaking in and getting past and stop skipping steps. Because if you're still judging, you still got some work to do. If you still sitting here trying to make it like, if you still riding out to you in your 30s and your 40s and you still got on, you still pressed over Jordans and jersey shirts and leggings, you wearing leggings like uniforms and certain shit of this nature all the time, and you still trying to embrace something in your youth, I need you to stop looking at it based on the external and go into that internal. And that's what we're getting into on Friday. Really getting past these layers of yourself and getting tired of your own bullshit. Embracing your bullshit. Bobby Emmett talked about that shit before. If you good at scratching your ass, you better raise that up to the surface. You good at scratching your ass. If you're not shit, embrace why you're not shit. If you're not the best, if something's stopping you, because until you acknowledge that, you can't do this work. You can't come into yourself. You can't heal until you admit the benefits of what you've been through. But that's what we get into on Friday. Inbox me. Hit me at G.O.D Alkhemist LLC. Everything from readings, Natal Chart analysis, human design charts, setting up that shadow work consultation, and be the fucking best. Because all I desire for you is to be the best. I love you. You love us. Ashe.